Okay, here we go.
All righty.
Today, Cindy and I are super excited to have you guys here on our podcast, Engines Off.
Yes.
Cindy, I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So I'm just going to jump right into introducing Teepa. Yeah, because I really want to get to our interview with her. So Teepa Snow is an occupational therapist with over 40 years of rich and varied clinical and academic experience. Her experiences led her to the development of GYM's State of Brain Change and the Positive Approach training strategies. Her company, Positive Approach to Care, provides an online and in-person education and products to support those living with brain change. She also co-founded the Snow Approach Foundation, a not-for-profit organization based in Hillsborough, North Carolina. Teepa presents with extraordinary expertise and humor to audiences throughout the world. Teepa, welcome to Engines Off finally.
Yes.
Wow. Yes. It's good to be here. And where do I turn off my engine? I forgot. I mean, because, I didn't know I needed to throttle it back.
Give it some throttle. We're getting ready to go.
That's right. That's right. Put her in neutral and relax.
That's right.
Teepa, I
remember how to do that.
Wait, I just have to start off by saying I'm a speech therapist. And in grad school, your name was invoked a lot, and so I just graduated a couple years ago.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just a couple years old.
See, right. Yeah. See, right. So it's all good. But so having you on here today is I'm going to apologize because I'm fangirling a little bit.
Oh, don't fangirl me. Oh, no. We're in this together. It's so fun to actually meet people who love what they do. Mm-hmm. And really are creative about what they do, which is really the meat and the potatoes that make the meal what it needs to be for people living with dementia, is that combination of loving it and being creative and flexible.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. So Teepa, you dedicated your career to helping individuals with dementia and families. You're an occupational therapist, but you've kind of dedicated your life to dementia and their families. What sparked that passion in this field? I mean, with occupational therapy, you could have kind of gone anywhere with that. Why dementia?
Well, what happened? I was working in a long-term care community, and a young guy, one of the other therapists, was like, "Oh, I'm going to drop him. I mean, there's no point. I mean, he's not really getting anything out of this. I mean, he's plateaued." And what I heard was, I'm tired of working with him, and I'm not willing to put the effort and energy in to make a difference in his life. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, tell you what, before you drop him, how about if you transfer him over to me? Mm-hmm. And within, I would say, 2 weeks, he had made a dramatic shift, an improvement. And the young guy was, well, how'd you do that? And I said, are you really curious? Or are you just ticked off because I got him to do stuff he couldn't figure out how? Yeah. And it was a combination, but he said, but I don't want to do it. And I said, yeah, I know. Yeah. I could tell. And so what I was finding more and more in long-term care, and this was 40 plus years ago, because I've been in practice 45, was that many people in rehab saw people living with dementia as a waste of their energy and time, because they weren't going to learn new things. And I was finding out, well, you're wrong. People can learn new things, and they do learn new things. And mostly they learn that you don't like them. And you know what? When somebody doesn't like me, I don't want to be there. When somebody doesn't show me that they get me, why should I engage with them? And so I could see what was going on sort of in a sideways way. And so I got super excited, and I got super committed to realizing, wow, boy, do we sell people short. Look at all these people here who are being sold short because people come into this with mindsets that are closed. And it's like, yikes, this is not okay. I don't want this to be me in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. Now, little did I know, here I am, these many years later, still trying to help people recognize, wow, maybe if we looked at this a little differently, we could have some different outcomes.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is awesome. That's very interesting that you say that. And being a therapist, and I've worked mainly in home health, but I understand that. And if you are not paying attention, if you're not curious about dementia, you can fall into that. There's so much that works against therapists right now anyhow, with the productivity and the time limits and the time constraints and all of that. and trying to work with people with dementia, that kind of plays into that. But, a lot of times with caregivers, sometimes they feel like, well, therapy, I've heard therapy's not going to help them anyhow. So what are we doing? And trying to balance them understanding, we're not going to cure them, but there are some things that we can do to help them. Is how do you handle those situations with family members and trying to get them?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're feeling like your dad, your client isn't going to change it all. And it's like, well, let me try something. I'm really super curious what happens if we try something different. Mm-hmm. Will you be willing to watch?
Right.
Okay, let's see what happens when I do this. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how'd you get him to do that? Yeah, really curious, huh? Well, it's called, I gave a visual cue and then I offered a verbal prompt that was supported. And only then did I ask him to do something. And I showed him what it was. So tell you what, try it with me. Here, I'll be him and you. And so I tricked them into engaging with me classically. And then they're like, wow, that felt really different. And it was like, yeah, isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. All right. So tell you what, now, do you want me to do it with him again, or do you want to give it a try?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I use a lot of coaching strategies to trick people. And I say trick because it feels a little tricky to get people to let go of what they think they know, to be willing to realize they don't know what they're wrong. Actually, they're missing so many opportunities in choosing something different because they think that door is slammed shut and there's no windows. And it's like, well, that's not true. And of course, I got off the Medicare boat a while back because I said, I can't see this one actually taking me where I want to go. I'm going to be taking another route here. But I mean, I appreciate people who still use that system, but I also know that for me, it was never the right system because it put people in little boxes. And I'm interested in helping people live their lives.
Yeah,
that's right.
So let me ask you maybe a little bit differently, Teepa. So most of my career has been spent in long-term care, and working with community members in the long-term care that are living with dementia, and then also their family members that come in to see. What kind of advice could you give the family member that has their loved one in a memory care community to advocate for their loved one? Maybe advocate for them, but also kind of stick up for them and for the therapist that's there that maybe has that idea that, well, they're not going to get any better. What advice could you give the caregiver?
Yeah, I say, wow, well, I'm so disappointed. I had thought that it would be possible that with your expert like background in your training, tell me a little bit about your background in dementia, because I know some curricula, from what I've heard, don't actually emphasize that a lot, and others do. So I'm curious, did you get a chance to do a geriatric specialty, or were you just sort of here because that was a job opening? I'm really curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm being friendly, but I'm also being a little bit, here's the problem. A lot of people end up in long-term care because that's the job they found, not because it's where they want to be. Yeah. And I want to find that out about the person who's going to be potentially doing something, because I'm not going to call you out, but I do want to hold out that, this is an area of practice that I want you to really realize you're affecting my life and my person's life by having your attitude. And I'd like to have you really examine that a little. There are at least a few people online that I've watched that are therapists, and they do some amazing things. If you haven't seen any of their podcasts or broadcasts, I'd be happy to share a couple with you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Because I think we don't want to assume that people know what they're doing in these health profession roles. Because on average, we got a lot of curricula, a lot of schools and universities who are still 20 years ago, still thinking dementia like they were thinking dementia 20 plus years ago. And you know what? It's time to let go of that and really put some energy into it, because it's a major patient client population that people are going to be seeing one way or the other. And if it's not older adults, it could be people with head injuries after a head injury. It could be somebody after a stroke developing a dementia. It could be somebody who has autism, who's starting to age and develop a dementia secondary to autism. I mean, mental health issues. This is going to be in lots of spaces and places. And it's time to go, hello, dementia's here and it is not going away. So let's better understand it so we can support our clients better.
Yeah, that kind of leads me to another question that I had. So that the field, like you mentioned, the field of dementia care is constantly evolving. It looks different than it did whenever I was first in that, working in long-term care. What are your hopes and expectations for the future of dementia research and treatment? And do you believe that there's a cure for dementia? Is it possible?
Okay, now you've hit the soft spot here, which is, I think dementia is incredibly complicated. I think everybody wants the primary type of variation of dementia, Alzheimer's, to be the be all and end all. Recently, I was just at a research program and may have to edit that. That's because I'm in a room that has an automatic light fixture and my desk is like for it to find me. So this may need to get edited out. I'll let you know. There we go. So one of the challenges that we face is that I think Alzheimer's, the latest estimate is there's over 100 influencing genes to developing Alzheimer's, 100 genes. Wow. And we know that the beta amyloid hypothesis is sort of like, it's an indicator, but it's not the root cause of starting a dementia. And then we have Lewy body and we have frontal temporal dementias and we have posterior cortical atrophy and we have, there are over 120 forms and causes and types and we have TDP-43. And so ultimately, do I think there might be things that help? Yes. Do I think there will be chemical supports that will make a difference? Absolutely. But I think for right now, risk reduction is huge.
Right.
And managing somebody's abilities to live their life well is going to be where we're at for quite a while. And I think for me, seeing dementia as an ever-changing disability rather than a terminal illness is the way that I can help people better appreciate, let's try this for right now. And as things shift and change, we'll try something else. This will probably work right now, given everything we know. Probably not in the afternoon, only in the morning, because the afternoons are different. Of all disabilities, this is the most variable. And it's like, wow, it requires a lot of flexibility in thinking. And that makes it super hard.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the medications, and I know there was a medication not too long ago that was released that seems like there might be some hope as far as maybe managing it and maybe slowing it down a little bit. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah. So the challenge with the medication slowing it down, it reduced how quickly people lost points on a cognitive scale. But when you ask the people who are living with it, did it change your life? Or the carers caring and providing support, did it change things? Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But it looked a little different on paper. But the change was sort of really minimal. But if we got people even earlier, before they started really laying down the plaque and that being so profound, could we make a difference if we could catch it early in the moments when there's irritation and there's inflammation, but there's not so much that it triggers the conversion? Is that where, and then can we keep them on this pattern for a while and by 5 to 10 years? Well, 5-10 years is nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah.
So I think, that the idea of improving my quality of life, but we have found sometimes how we interact with people, how we support, how we structure life, and people finding purpose after diagnosis actually extends their abilities as well or better than any medication they were put on. And we've had people actually come off pretty much all their meds and actually blossom because they have a purpose and they have value and they're seen that way and they're active in their community and they're making a difference. And it's interesting to me how that alone can get somebody up in the morning and going in the morning and getting their clothes on and walking out the door and being on a screen. And it's just been remarkable to me to see people preserve abilities as much as they can and still be active and open with their changes when they have that opportunity to be present and accounted for.
That's interesting because it's just like, how do we get that statement to the headlines above the medication and the everything else, Right.
It's just like, or to those therapists who can really help with educating the family caregiver. And to the people and the family caregivers and the caregivers in their lives, how can we bring that message?
Elevate that rather than that's amazing.
And the gloom and doom, and she's already dead, and she died 5 times before she finally died. Yeah. I mean, that one, our folks really, it was a UK commercial for research, and it really set our backs up because it was like, Mom died when she couldn't remember how to make the Sunday roast. And we were like, why don't you help her? I mean, you little turd. How about you get off your tail end and figure out how to help? Just because you're used to her putting it on the plate for you, maybe you could put some energy into that. She couldn't remember how to dress herself in the awful clothes I hated anyway. Did you hear yourself?
I'm not sure that people do hear themselves. Working in long-term care like I did and working with some of the family members, I think there's such a change, that the caregiver, the family caregiver has to go through. It's a process that they have to go through, but they don't think they can hear sometimes when they say that. I'm like, well, let's stop for a minute and stop saying the word, remember, Mom, remember, and just, I don't know. It's almost like as a treating therapist, you're not only treating or helping with, you're helping with the family caregiver because it's a process they go through as well.
I would agree. Anytime there's dementia in the room, I'm always treating at least 2 individuals because I've got to treat both sides of the equation or I don't end up with the skill needed to support someone because I'm here temporarily. But what we have to figure out is how do we get this transition, this translation so that there's a better interaction, and it always involves the art of letting go of what you can't have to celebrate what's possible. And helping family members or staff members, letting go of what you can't have. She's not going to take a shower. Okay. I need you to let go of that right now. That is not on the table. What she might do is wash up at the sink with you if you don't make this a big deal. Like, oh, you've got something. Hey, Cindy, it's like right under your jawline. Here, let me hand you a cloth. Here, see if you know what? Come over here to the mirror and tell you what, wet it with warm water. I think you're going to like it better if it's warm because that's sort of cold. Okay. Now, while you're there, go ahead and do while you got it, just because it's a little hot out. Why don't you go ahead and do your neck? Yeah, that'd be great. You know what? I'm going to get you. Anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah. I love that. And we follow you on TikTok and we've seen your videos and some of that stuff, Teepa, some of your resolutions for situations like that are so simple that it almost makes, as the viewer, makes me go, why didn't I think of something like that? Or even, I feel like maybe the family caregiver is in the moment and they've got frustration that they're dealing with that they can't think of the simple things.
Yes.
That if it would just be so much easier if you would just do it my way, Mom or Dad. And so, and I love how simple that is. What kind of advice could you give a family caregiver at that point in time when they're trying to get something done? What advice could you give them to kind of take a breath and assess the situation and then what?
Yeah. So human brains are meant to do things. And that's what gets us in trouble. When we are not getting what we want, we think we'll push harder and then we'll get there. It's like the hardest thing in the world to go, wow, whoa, this is so frustrating for both of us.
Yeah.
And so I teach people to use whoa, because they force you to breathe out. And I teach people to throw their hands out to the side, throw them out and down, because it makes you quit looking at your person for a second. and acknowledges what's happening is we're going head to head. And what I need us to realize is this is the thing we don't like. I like you. I don't like this thing. And so now I've converted it from me on you to this thing that neither of us are doing well right now. Yeah. And I acknowledge, man, this is really hard. I'm trying to help and it's not helping. Yeah. Jeez, I hate that.
Yeah.
Just simply recognizing, wow, I need to shift perspective. And if all I can do is let go of my eye lock on you and turn this way, what a difference.
Yeah.
Because it gives me the space to think for a second because it really isn't working. Or I wouldn't be feeling this way.
Absolutely. I feel like probably like 85 to 90% of working with somebody is validating that human being as a communicative human being, that they have feelings. Just because they might not be able to express it doesn't mean that they don't need validation. What I feel like that technique kind of goes along with that. Is there something else that a person could do, a family caregiver could do, to just stop and validate, first and foremost, validate that person as a human being, and then try to move forward together?
The hardest thing for somebody to do is take a step back. And so what I'll do is say, leave your 1 foot planted. Because when you do that, your body releases that confrontational stance. So if you're trying to help someone and you don't realize you've gotten in closer and closer and you're leaning in and you're trying to get your hands on them and they can't figure it out, stepping back with 1 foot. I've not let go completely, but I am stepping back. That gives both of us more space. And so, I mean, it becomes literal space. That I need to take my hands out of your intimate space because what's going on there is simply not working for either one of us. And so to let go of the moment, it's so hard, but it's so important to do. And if you can't let go in that moment, you're doomed to push harder. And I mean, I say doomed because even if you get your way this time, be aware that either the person will now just sort of collapse down and let you do it all the time, but with no energy. And then everybody's like, well, she just sits in the chair. I can't get her to do anything. And it's like, yep. And that's called apathy. And I got to wonder how much before that was, Mom, what are you doing? Nope. Hang on. No. Mom, wait a second. Or, Teepa. Oh, Teepa. No. Don't go in there. Hang on. Don't go. That's not your room. Come back here. Sit here. And we don't realize how many times we say things like, oh, Teepa, can you sit down? I don't want you to fall. It's like, and then I take your advice and I just sit here. And then you're upset about that. Or I ignore you and then you put your hands on me and then I nail you because I told you I'm moving and you said, no, you're not. And I'm like, you are not the boss of me. And then I up my conversation with movement because I don't have a lot of language, or I use an ugly word for you and say, get your damn hands off of me. And I throw my arm up and then you'll be documenting me. And it's like, well, that's helpful. Did you know I had dementia and you put your hands on me? And I said, no.
Exactly.
Teepa, you touched on this earlier about like tactile cues and verbal cues like that. Can you just kind of like the hierarchy of cueing? Because when I worked with my families and their loved ones that were living with dementia, there were so many times that they were like, Dad, I need you to go over here and go get your shoes. And, and they wouldn't, and I would tell them, or they would tell me, he can do that. And I was like, well, yeah, you just sat there.
He walked over there and he took a shirt out of the closet. That's not what I asked him to do. And it's like,
yeah. And so I don't think
that was a really good observation. So you saw that he visually located the shirt, but you had said shoes, shirt. Wow. So isn't that interesting? So I wonder what happens if you just point down and show him your shoes as so visual first. So, hey, Dad, shoes. Could you go get your, oh, there they are. And I'm now pointing down to where I want his brain to look.
Yeah.
And so that visual, then verbal. And then if he's still standing and looking at me, then I'll say, you know what? Hand under hand guidance. I take that hand, get on left hand. Tell you what, we're going to go right over here. There we go. Come on. To the shoes when I get there. And I say, can you get up? Perfect. Excellent. Come on back.
Yeah.
Because I know, wow, that distance traveled, that was too far for him to figure out what I was asking for and bring it back. I need to go with him. Then he can bring it back. Then he can sit down. Then we'll figure out how much more cueing needs to happen to get the shoes on and the laces tied.
Yeah. So we want to go with least restrictive. So the verbal, because that's what most people.
Nope. I'm going to do visual first. So I always, isn't that interesting? I go, oh. Now, go see if you can find a lay like this over on that wall. So I can, because I know full well that there's a high risk of loss of verbal capacity as dementia and as the weekend or the day rolls on. So what I'll do is, you know what? How about we go get a book to read? And so it's not a massive visual cue, but I'll often, something to drink. I start with visual, then add the verbal.
Then the verbal.
To affirm the visual and perhaps refine it. And then when there's, here you go. And then I add the tactile. So that's my pattern. Now that for a speech person, how's that work?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've had orange juice thrown on me before, Teepa, so just putting it out.
Yeah, I know. It's the tricky part of like, did you get what I said? And it's like, no. Okay. Well, and that's why people pouring things out. I mean, I've had all kinds of interesting, like, okay. It wasn't what I thought we were going to do with that.
And here we are.
So I've learned more visual cueing. So I'll show this and then I'll hand you your cup. And think, okay, well, that's going to increase the odds that you actually drink it rather than I'm wearing it or it's on the floor, or you set it down, because I gave you a really strong visual cue of what to do with it. And I might even then add the verbal cheers.
Yeah. And then, so then the hand under hand would be like more of the tactile cue.
It is. And I use it for comfort. I use it for guidance. So when I'm in support of someone, I can use my hand. Most people are right side dominant. So I tend toward the right side. I engage with them with the right and I go, ooh. You're looking at. Picture, right?
Yeah, right.
You're looking up at that picture. You can't quite tell what it is, but you're super curious.
Yeah, right.
And so now I can say, come on, let's go look at it. And I can get.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, it's a Zen tangle that somebody did. It is the most elaborate thing I've ever seen in my life. But it's not. But I can get somebody up out of a chair on the far side of the room to come and look at this with me. With just that simple, wow, take a look at that.
Yeah, right. I love that.
Yeah, that is very cool. Very cool.
I love that.
You know, Teepa, we do kind of shifting gears a little bit here with the things, you know, we do a lot of different caregiver trainings and stuff, just the physical aspect of caregiving. And we also do a lot of product reviews, and we have people all the time asking us, you know, what is a good monitoring system out there for my loved one with dementia? And, you know, what is your when people? I'm sure people ask you that, you know, and how am I going to keep track of them? They're leaving the house, and I can't, you know. So, you have any recommendations of any technology that's out there that is helpful?
Yeah, so some of it depends on where you live and your expertise, because the simplest thing is a door alarm that I at least know you've gone out the door.
Right.
Some people can handle a ring system or something like that, where it acknowledges, oh, someone's just exited, someone's gone. And I typically use, I also recommend Project Lifesaver, and that's the one I recommend if you're in an area where you have hit and miss cell signal and hit and miss abilities to use the Apple Watch or one of those tracking like GPS systems. Because if somebody does leave, I absolutely need an emergency find. But I also then want to not have that happen again. But typically, many folks will wait until the first time it happens to want to deal with the bigger issue. There are complex systems that have a boundary and people can go outside and around within a certain distance, and that works. We also have systems that will monitor people entering the space and leaving the space, because sometimes it's not so much elopement risk as them inviting people into their world that aren't necessarily the safest people to have there, or having people leave. And I thought I had somebody there with mom, and they just left. And it's like, wait a minute, she was supposed to be there the whole shift. I mean, and I'd love to say that's a rare occurrence, but we know that those kind of things are important for carers and family members and professional teams that are putting together a team. So there are a host of those kind of resources starting to be developed. I tend to like ones that are less intrusive into privacy, but I do want to know when things are starting to go south. I know that motion detectors are going to tell me when somebody potentially has fallen. They aren't going to help me keep them from falling if I'm waiting for them to signal that somebody's gotten up. So I tend to help people think about movement sensors in the bed to indicate somebody's starting to rouse. If somebody's starting to rouse and recognize, oh, I need to get there, because they're starting to wake up a little bit. So they go from still to active, and then I need to peek in or keep an eyeball. I don't know. Those are a few examples that I can think of.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about being newly diagnosed. So when that's being newly diagnosed, again, like we talked about earlier, it is a process for everybody involved. In that first, that getting that first diagnosis, and you mentioned putting a team together. So I'm a family member now, and I'm dealing with a loved one that's living with dementia, or they just recently got diagnosed, and I want to start putting together a team. What might a team like that look like, and where should I start to putting a team together, or do I need to get an evaluation? Is there a certain type of evaluation they need to ask for? Where would I start with that?
Well, if you got a quote unquote diagnosis from the general practice setting, and it really was, they did the mini mental state exam, or they did the MOCA, or they did something like that, or they just sort of said, I'm concerned. And they said, well, she's 82. She sounds like she has memory issues. Well, it's probably Alzheimer's. That's a very different diagnosis than somebody who's actually gotten a good workup. And the bad news across the world is that most people, 20% of people get a good workup. Most people don't. It's a hit and miss. I mean, in 30 questions on the mini mental is one of the really weak ways to recognize people having issues. I tend to ask people, tell me what you're noticing, that kind of thing. But what comes next once we've said, well, there's some kind of dementia going on? I think people deserve a good workup, primarily because they could have a combo of dementias. And I want to know, and I think they deserve knowing what's happening for them if they have curiosity. Now, if they don't have any curiosity, then I turn to the carer and say, how curious are you? Because it might help you wrap your head around this. There's a huge difference between Lewy body dementia and a standard Alzheimer's condition. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy and post-cortical atrophy. I mean, there are huge differences. There's so many different dementias.
Yeah.
And if I didn't get a good workup and suddenly I'm falling a lot, and my falls are pretty significant, and I also can't get my eyes to move very well. And I'm having some problems with saliva control. And then somebody should be going, whoa, whoa, hang on here. I think we need to get super curious about what's going on here and get a specialist looking at this.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a standard form a team and let's just move it forward. I think those teams need to be highly skilled, or we're really going to not serve people, at least initially, very well.
Would you say starting with maybe like a neurologist? So if you got, your primary care doc said, well, I think I'm concerned and maybe I am one of those curious people that goes, you know what? Mom has been acting a little bit different lately. There's been a personality change. Maybe I want to know a little more about that. Neurologist?
Yeah, this gets really tricky because I've had neurologists that don't like dementia. And so they do a really quick slap dap, boom. Yeah. What does it really matter? And I have others that are really detailed people and they're very skillful and they're really committed. I've seen the same with geriatricians and I've seen the same with people with geropsychiatry. So I want to know who my potential referral source, where my referrals are going to go and build a relationship with them. And if I don't like the plumber, I'm not going to invite him back in like 5 times. I'm going to check out the plumbers. Is he actually doing what we talked about? I'm not a big fan of 4 hours of testing. I'll be honest, the neuropsychology stuff, I think, wow, that's a lot to ask of someone. And it's really depleting. And I've worked with people who are so depressed after they finish it because they realize, oh my heavens, I struggled with that. Or they're so angry, they'll never go back again. So for me, it's sort of, all right, well, let's take a look at the situation and see what our best option is. I'd rather work with a gerontological nurse practitioner who's skilled, frankly, than I would a higher echelon person who just wants to get through it, or they want to give it to their interns or their, residents to do I've worked in teaching hospitals, so trust me, I've had lots of experience of all kinds of interesting. And I also am curious because even though you were just diagnosed, it doesn't mean you're early in your dementia.
Right.
Right.
That's a real issue as well. It's like, how long has this been going on? A lot longer than anybody thought.
So then basically probably a family member that's curious would need to maybe do some research and find out, is there
I think that's why people end up on the internet, is because, frankly, I'm not getting enough good data. And even people living with will say, I need more info. I want to know more about this. And they should, because we would never just turn to somebody and say, well, you have cancer. You could try treatments. I don't know. It may or may not make a difference for you, but, do you want to try something or are you good?
Sure.
We would never do that in cancer. Can you imagine?
No.
And yet that's still such a very common scenario. Instead of, okay, so here's some things I'm going to recommend. Now that we've identified you have a changing condition, here's what I want you to try. I want you to get socially connected somehow. So let's look at what your social connections might be. I want you to actually be physically active, if you could. And you are doing some things, but here's some issues. And so, you know what? I also want you to make sure that you're working on the skills that you still have. So I'm going to make a recommendation for some rehab personnel. I'm also going to make a recommendation for a care manager, because we want to make sure your spouse, your sister, your whatever, is not going to have to carry the load alone. So we want to build something here from the start. You're going to need somebody to help figure this out. And I'd like you to get used to that idea of getting help, but not letting somebody take over.
I love that. As working with people that were living with dementia in long-term care, I use the global deterioration scale with the individuals, like the actual staff that would work closely with them and get a feel for what they were seeing, and talk to family and kind of get a feel for what they were seeing. But what I used it most for was if I could stage them on that global deterioration scale, it helped me help the family wrap their mind around where their loved one was and what potentially expect in the future. Because I found that the family caregiver that was their big concern. First of all, they had to wrap their brain around it, right? That their person had changed. And then the next thing is what can I expect? And I think that's the way it is with any diagnosis and any healthcare practitioner. Here's what's going to happen next, or here's what you can expect. And so I kind of want to get your thoughts on something, what could a family caregiver ask, their practitioner to
yeah. So if I were Cindy, you and Christy, let's say you guys were a couple and one of you was developing a dementia. What I would probably say is, okay, I'm going to give you a scale, and this scale is not for sure this is the level they're at, but what we're going to notice is, where does the person tend to spend most of their time? Are they more like in a diamond state of mind? Are they in an emerald state of mind? Are they more amber, ruby, or pearl? Now, I'm going to go over what each of those means. A diamond is a little rigid and inflexible, but does well with habit and routine. And they like what they like, and what they don't like, they're not going to do. And can be sort of cutting and unpleasant if it's not going well, but they can also shine, and they can hold their own on their self-care on a daily basis, and with some support, do weekly things. But an emerald is more on a daily basis, and they're on the go, but they're not always sure where or when, and they're skipping steps and making mistakes or getting caught in a cycle, and they don't know how to come out. And one of the most frequent statements you're going to hear or questions is going to be, what do I do now? What's next on the agenda? When is my appointment? Over and over. So when you hear those repetitive things, you're going to think, ooh, really flawed, but really still wanting to have friends, not bosses, and still being better if you can give me step by step than if you try to take over. So I use my GEM states, which is based on Allen cognitive levels, because I don't want to talk about people being moderately deteriorated or severely deteriorated. I want to talk about, what do they still have? What are the kinds of things you're going to notice? And what can we do environmentally and in our care support that helps them shine? Because, even someone in a pearl state where they're trapped inside the shell of the body, there are still things in there. And I better really pay attention to what I'm saying around them, because whether or not they get all the meaning, I don't know. I know they can still hear if they could have hearing before. And I want to watch how many stimuli I present at a time, because I can really cause an overload. But I also know that when everything goes just right, whoa, look, they're still here.
Yeah, that's right.
Moments. And people can have great clarity, which means, wow, for just a second there, I saw that beautiful diamond from before, that now we're more pearl-like, in this moment.
And Teepa, where can people go to find out more about your GEMS stages?
Yeah, certainly on our website, teepasnow.com. We have so many webinars and resources available, free ones available, and then more advanced if you're interested. We've tried to really, really develop it so that visual field and visual awareness and visual capacity and physical skill sets and also the whatchamacallit that you like, the things where you can when you're going to do it, well, shit, I know that.
I'm lost. I know.
Well, that was a ruby that was a ruby state of language where it's like, I know the but I it's so ridiculous. I had it, but it and so a lot of the ums and the hesitance in speech, where it makes it really hard to figure out what I'm talking about. But in that moment, it's the best I could do, and recognizing, wow, yeah, so you're trying to say something and it's just not coming out. Yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we appreciate you being on here with us, Teepa. It really is for me, so awesome to get to meet you and talk to you, and hopefully we'll get to meet you time.
Yeah.
And so we appreciate you being on here. And if there's anything else, is there anything else that you want to kind of leave a parting thought or parting words for us?
I love what you all are doing and recognizing products are important, but products used well are the answer. We don't want to just throw adaptive equipment or products at people. We have to see how it fits. Right. And if you don't know how it's going to come together, it's really hard. And so I love the work that you choose to do, which is to integrate, not just recommend arbitrarily, but really looking hard at, okay, who's this for? Who will this work for? Who will do well with? Where is this going to help and where is it not? Because I think we've got to get better at supporting one another when we create things. Right. Because otherwise, it just sits in a closet or on a shelf or it never happens. People don't get what they need because there's a misunderstanding and misperception. Yeah. So thank you.
And we really appreciate that. And again, thank you so much, Teepa, for coming on here with us. And
pleasure.
Yeah, absolute it really has been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.
Falling asleep with your head in the wrong position is a pain in the neck. You deserve Tausi Comfort for head, neck, and back support. Go to tausibrands.com and get your comfort on.
So as you can see, you can grab the loops, and with the weights, it's going to allow that towel to stay. You don't have to grasp the towel. You don't have to grasp